My name's Adam Sutherland and I'm the Director of Grizedale Arts, which is an arts organisation based in the Lake District. I'm here at Hauser Wirth at the invitation of Alice Workman to consider rural culture and create an exhibition illustrating many of the ideas that I've been thinking about and working with over the last 30 years now. As you arrive at Hauser Wirth, obviously you're walking into a farmyard, and in the middle of the farmyard there's a goat pavilion which relates to the exhibition. It's a work by Fernando García-Dory and Japanese architect Takashi Hayatsu. And it's part of the first room that is function, really. It's about artists and creative people thinking about the elemental, food production, and things that are of value and of use to people. Moving out of the room illustrating contemporary function for artists, we come into two galleries that look at the history of movements in the rural. Actually, often people who've been rural, moved to the city, developed ideas and then returned to the rural. And they're part of a trajectory that leads through to the arts and crafts movement. And at the end of the room you see the magnificent Holman Hunt, Afterglow in Egypt, which represents in a way the pre-Raphaelite arts and crafts movement and is part of a sort of junction into the next space. But the relationship that is being drawn there is to John Ruskin, really, and the idea of nature as the teacher. I think also in that painting that there's a sense of a return to Eden, and you see that image of the harvest repeated throughout. And inevitably, I think one of the powerful things about living rurally is the connection to the seasons, and the harvest is the kind of spectacular moment that we all, we're all dependent on, actually. So the works in the archive spaces are, in a way, a kind of trail. They're just pointing to moments. Hopefully you'll find something of interest and you'll pursue that. So I've kind of used, I suppose, in a way, a kind of spin in many cases on a lot of things that are fairly traditionally celebrated. For example, there's a Beatrix Potter drawing. It's a drawing of mycelium, the network underneath mushrooms, and was part of her paper that she wrote for the Linnean Society on fungi. So it's a side of Beatrix Potter that we perhaps are not so aware of. As you go into the Rhodes Gallery, into the largest space, darkened and highly theatrical, and representing lots of artist projects and lots of things that are in transition. So, for example, the House of Ferment is a representation of a larder from a farmhouse that's focused on fermenting as a means of storage, so the transformation of food and preserving of food. The table running down the middle of the room represents scores of different artist projects to do with food, many of them with very different ambitions, some of them dramatic and theatrical, some of them functional and useful. The anchor hold is functioning as an apple store, and you're welcome to eat stored apples. And then around the walls we have three groups of works, very major paintings, very exciting to have here from public and private collections. A Dutch still life from the early 17th century. The John Martin painting Sadak in Search of the Waters of Oblivion, which shows man's tiny struggle against a sort of volcanic landscape from, I think, 1815. And then The Four Seasons by Arceboldo, running down above the compost heap. So as you come out of the Rhodes Gallery, on your right you'll see the Honest Shop, which is local makers, amateur makers. I feel that making is something that's a very important activity and, again, part of an enhanced everyday life. And the idea of the Honest Shop is about encouraging people to make simple things, and it's not to position them as art or enhance them through kind of a presentation or something, but it's part of everyday and in a way simple economy that works very effectively. It's been great while I've been here to see all of the stuff coming in to the Honest Shop and the community, the local community around Bruton. In fact, you can just come, you can bring things in, put them in the shop. There's a nice system that runs and you can sell them, and it's an engaging point. And the final room, the Bourgeois Gallery, really is about representing the rural within urban culture, and it's fairly broad. Some of it is critical, some of it is not. I think I'm interested in how rural culture impacts and what parts of it are valued in urban places, and I've often thought there's more rurality, as we might understand it romantically, in urban places than in rural places. One place you always see a lot of man-made fibre is the rural, whereas you get into central London and everyone's in natural fibres. There's also within that space an idea of an evolution of how the rural will be used in the future. How will it work? Is it festivals? Is it going to be covered in plastic? How are we going to envision it? Is it a playground? Do we need it? It's a very sort of questioning, but I think quite hopeful and energised space. So it's very busy, it's very dense, there's a lot of material there, you can sit down to read. There's a lot of information about organisations that are doing interesting things in urban places, working with rural interests and concerns. And Hauser Wirth are running their workshops programme and talks throughout the exhibition. There's a huge programme which reflect on the themes of the exhibitions, but also look at making and engaging with some of the active elements here, from the Goat Pavilion to the bread oven and to many of the other perhaps more intellectual elements of the programme.